Check 1, 2. Check 1, 2. Good. Microphone check. Microphone check.
simpler today. Because I'm sure that's going to make all the difference in the world.
set. There you go. I think more 4.
it was cold.
Like the big computer with like the Southwest. Nice. Can reconvene our meeting to open session. The board has been in executive session since 6 o'clock to discuss a confidential legal matter, contractual matters, and a personnel matter, and with our apologies for starting this part of the meeting a little bit on the later side. If we could all please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We could have introductions.
Dave Hurst.
Wendy Sampson. Meredith Moriarty. Jody Monroe. Holly Dellenbaugh.
Christine Beck.
Willow Bear.
Jonathan Fishbein.
Judy Kehoe. First on the agenda is the approval of minutes. It is recommended that the Board of Education approve the minutes from the July 6th, 2021 regular board meeting.
So moved.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? That carries. Next up is our superintendent's report.
Sure. Thank you. So I have several things to report. It's been a while since our last meeting. The first really has to do with our food services program. So there's a significant labor shortage. I'm sure this isn't a surprise to anyone. Primarily in manufacturing and distribution. And so our normal channels of getting food and groceries and paper goods have been disruptions. And they're expecting these to last for 1 to 2 years. So the recommendation from our experts in the industry is basically to have longer shelf life items for frozen and dry goods. And so our food service department is currently trying to plan for holds for about 1 to 1.5 weeks of planned usage. What this will mean is that it will require some additional storage capacity beyond what we currently have available. So what we're planning to do for the coming years, we'll be renting an exterior refrigeration truck, which will be out here, to accommodate the expanded storage needs. So hopefully adding this storage will allow our school meals program to continue both effective and efficient operations until the production and distribution issues are resolved. So that's our plan to address some of those issues in food services. I also wanted to provide an update. We did an RFP for preschool services. If you recall, during the budget process, we were allocated some funding for that. It was somewhat of a surprise. We did issue an RFP on June 18th with proposals back by July 26th. We received 2 responses. However, neither of them were compliant with all the required elements by SED, their Office of Early Learning. Therefore, we have no viable proposals, so we won't be offering a UPK program during the 2021-22 school year. Judy Kehoe did speak with both of the proposers and let them know what their areas they were deficient in, and also let them know that we will reissue an RFP for the next school year, providing that funding is still available. And this will afford them the opportunity to address any compliance issues and be better prepared to respond for the following year. And both of them understood and were in agreement with this plan. I think when we spoke about this earlier, we knew the timing of this was just really tight. So hopefully we'll hear back from them next year. Also tonight, if you look out the window, we have an electric bus. And I'm thrilled to announce that we have been awarded the funding to purchase 5 electric buses for the district. We have an electric bus here, and we will be sharing this announcement with the public later this evening. I would like to thank the community for supporting the proposal as part of our budget process in May. And also I'd like to give a big thank you to Judy Kehoe, Karim Johnson, who I think is in the back, our transportation director, and all the other staff in the transportation department who helped bring this plan to fruition. So, and Judy rode on the bus. I don't know if anyone else did.
It was really quiet.
And has air conditioning, right?
That was not a match for today's weather. Yes.
So,
That's not the ones we're buying.
yes, but very exciting news. And I wanted to provide a quick update on reopening. I think everyone is aware that the state basically said they're not providing guidance to schools. However, we have been getting quite a bit of guidance. I think we all can agree that COVID has had a dramatic impact on our lives for the past 17 months. The New York State Education Department did announce yesterday that it will be providing COVID-19 guidance regarding the coming school year in the absence of guidance from the governor's office and the State Department of Health. Knowing that state ed's guidance will be based pretty much on the recently released guidance from the CDC and the American Academy of Pediatrics, we have already begun to develop methodologies for welcoming students back in September. Our district staff team We'll be meeting for the third time tomorrow to further discuss mitigation strategies, and recommendations from this meeting will be brought forward to the District Task Force Committee, which will meet next Monday. We're also working with Kappa Region BOCES and our colleagues in other area schools, as we did last year. As stated prior, we are planning for all schools to be fully open for in-person learning in September. This is our priority and has been reinforced by the CDC and the American Academy for Pediatrics. To ensure our schools are safe and effective learning environments, a layered mitigation approach will be employed based upon the CDC's level of transmission zones and any guidance received from our local public health officials and any forthcoming reopening guidance from state ed. So we will be sharing more details available in the coming days and weeks as the plan's finalized. I will also be scheduling question and answer sessions for staff and families to discuss our back-to-school plans once that happens. So we'll be sending those dates out in the next week or so. We expect to have the plan, a pretty firm draft of that out to share with families by the end of next week.
Jody, does the reduction to 3 feet social distancing allow for all the middle school and high schoolers to return without rotating days?
Yes, so 3 feet distancing, that's what the CDC recommends, and that does allow all students to return. The other big question is, what about masks? And I think recently the guidance that has been shared both by the local Department of Health, it's been updated by the CDC, and the American Academy of Pediatrics is indoor mask wearing, particularly as infection rates get higher. There's also a lot of stress on encouraging vaccinations to keep the infection rates down. So, and testing in schools, which the local health departments did receive a good amount of funding from the federal government for testing in schools. So we only had one meeting with Albany County Department of Health on that, but I know the local departments of health have been meeting to discuss an approach for testing for schools for the fall.
What is Albany County saying right now with respect to quarantine, what the parameters are?
Right. So the big, last year, if you recall, particularly when the infection rates were quite high, quarantining was a really big factor as to why we had so many students and staff out of school. And the CDC guidance this year is within 3 feet distancing, and there's an exception for schools to really reduce the number of quarantines. So, for example, last year, all elementary students in a classroom were quarantined within 6 feet distancing. The CDC's current guidance is that even with 3 feet distancing with masks indoors, they don't recommend quarantining unless there's some more direct contact than just being in a classroom with students. And from what the local departments of health have indicated, they will follow that guidance. So with indoor mask wearing, that will reduce the quarantine numbers that we had to deal with last year and allow us to keep our students in school and not have to be home. So the indoor mask wearing will make a big difference. If that weren't the case and we weren't having students wear masks indoors, there would be much more significant quarantining, at least, and I would say this cautiously, as of today.
Are you able to comment at all on lunch at the middle school and the high school, like how that will work this year?
Right. For lunch, we believe that all the students will be, for example, in the cafeteria in the high school, by allowing the upperclassmen to have the off-campus privileges to leave for lunches as we've done in the past. So a more normal year for them. At the middle school, I believe we still need 2 locations because it's not as clear as the CDC guidance doesn't specifically address this, but the facing forward with mask off when you're eating, but not necessarily 6 feet. But I believe we need probably at this point 2 locations in the middle school. But they won't be sitting at these round tables facing each other with masks off, at least not to start the year.
Other questions?
Have we talked at all about air filters, increased ventilation, or air purifiers?
So we're gonna continue with the same filters we used last year. We did actually add money to the budget for that, to continue with those more high-end, I think it's the 13s, right, Greg? HEPA 13 filters that we'll continue to use in the buildings. And obviously encouraging windows open when weather permits, outdoor areas when weather permits, things such as that.
And I'm sorry, with the change in the quarantine rules, I assume that the K-5 special teachers will be able to teach in-person instruction this year as well?
Correct. That's the plan.
And also, at the end of last year, if you were vaccinated, there was no quarantining of vaccinated individuals. Anyone who was quarantined was unvaccinated. So I think that will be similar this year, at least to start. I think the biggest change in that guidance we've seen is they won't be quarantining entire elementary classrooms, which is a really big challenge last year. So that's good news for us.
And K-5 lunch still in their classrooms, we think, or we haven't gotten there yet?
Yeah, in our last meeting, we talked about that. I think that we will probably start the year doing that. And then depending on how things progress, look to maybe bring the upper grades into the cafeterias, and then maybe the younger grades as the year hopefully gets better. But to start the year, we have a pretty good system in place. Food Services has a pretty good system in place. And we really can't fit the kids in the cafeteria in some of the schools with the numbers and the, table and things. And if they're sitting in desks anyhow, why not just keep them in the classroom to start the year?
And have we heard from any VLA families complaining that that's not an option?
No, I haven't heard anything about that. I think that both the CDC and the Pediatric Association really recognize the need for kids to be in school in person, and I think, if you talk to any of our staff, they would agree that that's our number one priority. Yep, and that's my report, unless anyone has further questions.
One other question about transportation. So the 3-foot distance also applies on the bus? Or is that
Busing is
different?
Yeah, because, if it's possible to keep 3-foot distancing, then certainly we will. And even in classrooms, if we can keep more than 3-foot distancing, which many classrooms we actually can, we will do that. But on the buses, we have to be able to transport all kids so they can get here, so they may not be 3 feet. We will still do seating charts like we did last year. We will still do, if you're a family member, you sit together, some of those protocols, but 3 feet on all the buses won't be possible. So it's just like transportation when you go out in the public, or as I was recently, everyone's wearing a mask, but you're sitting, close to each other. So.
I do have a question kind of related to staffing shortages and subs, possibly. I know a lot of times special teachers had to cover for classrooms. Have we looked at possibly hiring maybe permanent subs or additional teachers to maybe be floaters within the school, so at least we have coverage, so we don't have to do that as much? I don't know if that ever came up in any type of discussion.
Oh, it did. We had permanent subs here last year in all the buildings, and we're going to continue with that practice for the start of the school year this year. Probably, at least our plan is to plan for that for the first half of the school year and then see how things go. But that's our plan. It worked quite well last year for coverage.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure, because we seem to still have a teacher pool. We get good applicant. Right. We've had a good applicant pool. So maybe if it's something where we think there's a teacher we might want to hire later down the line, maybe this would be a good opportunity to hire somebody full-time as staff with benefits. It's kind of like a trial run if we have a staffage shortage, because I guess what I'm reading is like 1 out of every 4 teachers have been retiring across the country, and so I was just thinking of things that we could do to address that.
Yeah, in fact, the A couple of the teachers that we appointed this summer were some of our building subs last year, or subs that we filled in for the VLA, so it did work out to our advantage.
Okay. So you don't envision a big problem with that this year?
No.
Okay.
Any other questions for Jody at this point?
That's my report. Thanks.
Next up is the board report. I just wanted to echo Jody's thanks to Judy and Karim and everybody, including our community members, that really worked towards getting our electric buses. I'm very excited that we're moving in this direction. I don't know if anybody else has anything that they would like to share at this point.
Add on to that, I don't know if Paul Tick is here, but he did address that with a lot of the board members, the electric buses, and I personally wanted to thank him, being a community member, bringing awareness to me, at least, and some of our community members, because I think it's fabulous that we have our first of 5 electric buses.
Anybody else? Next up on our agenda is our first of 2 presentations this evening. The first one is on the potential facilities improvement project, presented by Judy Kehoe, Greg Nolte, and Drew Jones.
Good evening, everybody. So I think tonight marks our 7th presentation on the proposed capital project. We've been talking about this for months now, going over the various elements, looking at the priorities as they were identified within our 5-year facilities plan. And we've responded to many questions and provided adjustments to what was in the initial plan. And we appear to be getting much closer to being prepared to approve a project and bring it forward to the public. On the next slide, we have put all of the information from our various meetings, all of the handouts, the presentations. It's all available on our website. So if you missed a meeting and you want to get some additional information, that is where you can go to find that data. And tonight is really a critical meeting for us because we need to finalize our project scope if we are going to keep on the timeline that has been proposed. And as part of that project scope, of course, that's going to give us the total bond amount. So later on in the presentation, I'll go through some of the specifics for you on what the project costs look like and what we will pull from, either from our federal aid allotments that are available to us, our E-rate aid, use of the reserves, and then, of course, ultimately our building aid so that we can get to a budget-neutral, balanced capital project. So on the agenda tonight, it's the first step of the SEQR, that's the State Environmental Quality Review Act. So the action on the agenda tonight is going to ask the board to take a resolution that will designate the school district as the lead agent for purposes of this Environmental Quality Review Act. And with that approval this evening, which does require the project scope to be attached to it, we have to send out required notices to both SED and DEC to ask them if they're okay with the district assuming this lead agency status. That comes with a 30-day timeline. So if we hear from SED and DEC in, say, 15 days, we've met the requirement, and then we would be able to proceed at the September 1st meeting with the actual project resolution, which would spell out exactly what's included in the project, and it would form the basis of the legal ad and notices that are published that informs the community of exactly what is in this proposed bond, and then, of course, that also sets the date of the vote for the project. So tonight, it will not be to approve the project itself. It will simply be to approve the components of the project that will then allow us to issue the letters as per the SECR process in order to start that 30-day timeline. Okay? So, I'm going to turn it over to Greg Nolte, who is going to go through some of the scope clarification work that has occurred since the last meeting, and he will answer some of the other questions, and then when he's done with that, I'll pop back up and go over the finance piece for you.
Do you want it?
I'm over here behind you. Thank you.
Good evening. I won't be that quick.
No kidding.
Okay. Let me start out by, as the board and the public may remember, we had an original bond amount that we started with back in April of about $35.9 million. From those meetings, we had a number more stakeholder meetings where we defined scope a little bit more. We developed, we received feedback from a number of people and clarifications of really what certain elements of the project, what they wanted to include. So our design team looked at this information and dove deeper into the design and the concepts, and basically came up with about $3.18 million of added work clarifications that we need to add to that original bond amount. So I detailed these. I kind of broke it up into two sections here. And this is part one. The items on the left-hand side, the four items, we have previously talked about at a number of board meetings, and they represent about half of the scope clarification, or actually of the added cost, that $3.18 million. So I'm not going to go through all of these, but I'm just going to touch on a couple of these, just to give you a couple examples. At Hammer Grill, we have renovations to the kitchen, and as we looked at that scope, we determined that we did not include the attached restroom there, and the upgrades, so we ended up including that for $25,400. We're doing a lot of work at the Slingerland's cafeteria and in the kitchen, and as we looked at that scope, we found out that we did not include the replacement of the large rooftop unit. So we ended up adding that into the scope for $190,000. On a positive note, the upgrade to the high school security panel, I actually completed that out of my operating budget, so we were able to remove that from the original bond scope. Okay, so those give you some examples. I'll just finish up with we had a number of more stakeholder meetings for the synthetic turf, and we determined that we needed some additional entrances for crowd control, and looking at the concession stand, it was undersized, so we ended up adding 198 to that amount. At the last board meeting, I think I reported that the total synthetic turf cost was $5.25 million, and this addition was included in that amount. Okay, next slide. We've talked previously about the outdoor teaching area at the middle school, and I understand that this will be a topic possibly for tonight, so I just wanted to bring it up there. Again, the rendition that we had, and we did have a conversation after hearing some of the board's concerns. We did have conversations with middle school administration, and the principals there are appreciative of the many aspects and project elements that we've incorporated in this bond project, and understands if the board wishes to omit this project, understanding that this is something that we could add to a future project down the road. And this was for $258,000 or so. All right, so part two of these scope clarifications. Glenmont pit area. We had an initial scope that we thought is what was desired, and we met with the principals again, and they decided that they wanted to keep the pit concept that we have there and add technology and some storage. So with that comes an added cost of $78,000 that is part of this $3.18 million increase. For equity, we're putting in these outdoor pavilions at all of the schools, but we did not have Hammergrill and Ellesmere, so we ended up adding those two into the project for $267,000. In regards to the camera scope clarification, when we reviewed the July 6th board meeting presentation, we discovered that the camera work at Eagle, Slingerlands High School and Middle School was not included in the project total at the time. This work was included in the 5-year plan, so we need to add that to this, to the project, and that was $410,000. So by adding all of these scope clarifications, the proposed project is now $39,096,506. Okay. The capital project scope list that has been provided to the board and will be posted on the website once finalized will identify every project in the overall project. The list also identifies projects that are receiving either the federal E-rate or the ESSER funding, which you'll hear about from Judy a little later on. So in anticipation of the board's desire possibly to consider additional items, I ended up adding one more slide based upon the good news that we received today regarding the buses, the electric buses. The district's 10-year goal is, of course, to basically convert 50% of our large buses to electric. This year, we are purchasing 5 buses and the infrastructure for those buses. So, although some of the items that we presented were medium priorities at the last meeting, it's our recommendation, it's our number one recommendation that we would include the infrastructure to build out the bus fleet. So this is about $1.8 million and includes about $335,000 for 25 charging stations and the utility costs. So this is our overall basically recommendation to the board if they want to add anything. So before I turn over the presentation to Drew, who will talk about synthetic turf, are there any other questions at this point?
On the 25 bus charging stations, when you build that out, are these stations like similar to the stations that you would have for a private car, say at cross gates where you pull up and you can charge? And the reason I'm asking is because it means we're going to be having, if we have 5 buses now and we build out to 25, we're going to have 20 stations that at least for a year aren't going to be used, 15 that won't be used for 2 years, etc. And I'm wondering if there's a way maybe not to install the groundwork, what you need, but not put the actual charging station out there. Is that the plan?
Yeah, that's why we only identified 25 stations, because if you take the schedule into play here, by the time, we're going to be a year into design, a year for SED to review this. We would expect construction of this probably in 2024. Okay, so when you do the math, we figured about 25. We didn't want to get too many because, who knows in 3-4 years with the technology, it might be improved. Maybe the cost of these chargers will go down. So we just picked 25 at that point. So all the charging stations will not be purchased for basically the 43 buses. the 43 buses along this row right here.
Okay, just to be clear, you'll put out for use, you'll build out what you need for 25, but as far as the actual equipment that's going to stand out in the weather, you're not going to put that up until you need them. Is that accurate or not?
Yes, so future purchases, we feel that we could accommodate that within operating. So if we're only going to be purchasing 5 buses a year, 5 charging stations can be handled by future operating budgets, whether it comes out of the O&M budget or transportation.
Thank you.
So I just want to be clear what John, so are you buying 25 and putting up 25 now, or are you putting up 5 for the 5 buses that are here? Or are you building out 25?
Yes, so in order to have the charging units ready for when we get our buses, we are actually coming off of the building with a different type of charger, and basically the 5 buses will be going right behind what we're going to be taking it off of the existing service. We've already been in touch with National Grid, and they have a lot of work to do to get the main service down, to finish down Van Dyke and over to the bypass. And that's going to be, that may be many, 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 many months, if not a year, so.
But are we getting 25 bus charging unit? I think what Jonathan's hoping for is that there's only 5 units out there now, so the weather doesn't hit the elements. So do we have 5, or it sounds like we're getting 25?
Yes, so right now, out of the money that the board approved under this operating budget, we are getting 5 buses, and we are getting 5 charging stations.
All right. I think that it was just that statement right there, just to accommodate, so I think that was just a little bit confusing. So 5, okay, thank you. I do have one question, though, on the outdoor pavilions at Ellesmere and Hammergrill. Do we have them already at Slingerlands, Eagle, and Glenmont?
They're in the project.
Okay, and we just added the 2 that weren't there?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay. So now, can we bring up Drew?
Hello, everyone. Okay, so welcome to the turf portion of the meeting. So at the last meeting that we had with BOE, there was a lot of discussion about the turf. And there were some specific things that were asked for that we're going to be talking about today. Specifically, we wanted more information about the potential impact of the groundwater from the synthetic turf, specifically about chrome rubber, and we'll get to that specifically. We wanted to hear a little bit more about what the filter options are for that stormwater, and we wanted to discuss the potential impact of microplastics from the field on the environment or the users. So we will get to that in due time. But before we get there, I wanted to spend a little bit of time to talk about why we chose to do this project in the first place. And I'll take the next slide, please. So first off, we need to remember that this is not the stadium field. This is what's known as Field 2, that's right next to Delaware Ave, just on the other side of the softball field from Delaware Ave. We're looking to do a turf field for a number of reasons. The first is that this is going to be better meet the needs for students and staff in a number of key ways. It's going to expand the all-weather use from March to early December because this is not a field that's going to get waterlogged. It's going to be a more reliable playing surface because it's more level and consistent. There's going to be significantly less maintenance and upkeep because we're not mowing grass, we're not watering grass. It's not going to require any pesticides to maintain. It's also going to reduce significantly the team's reliances on other turf fields or other facilities when the fields that we have now are not able to be used because they're too wet. And turf facilities like these, and specifically at Bethlehem, is going to be a resource for serving the recreational needs of the whole community. And this is not just about athletics, this is not just about the school, this is about the community at large and a resource for everyone. So let's dive into the questions that we were asked to answer. So we continue to be an environmentally focused group here at the district and in their design team. And the studies have shown that there are no adverse effects to health of users that's from the DEC. Specifically, the 2019 report from the New York State DEC says crumb rubber may be used as an infill without significant impact on groundwater quality. And an important note is that the field will be designed in a very specific way to maintain that fill on the field. And we'll get into those specifics a little bit later. On the point of microplastics, we acknowledge that this is a global issue, but synthetic fields have been used for decades and evolved over time, and we have not been able to identify any scientific studies that conclude microplastics from synthetic fields cause measurable negative environmental impacts. And we think that we've got an excellent project here, and broadly, the design team, the district, and its users, we recommend this project for inclusion in this project. So how are we going to control this crumb rubber infill and keep it on the field? And we're going to be using all of the measures that you see here, and we're going to be doing everything we can in the design and the designed maintenance of the facility to keep the crumb rubber where we want it. That involves building barriers, doing walk-off grates at the exits and entrances to the field, providing boot brushes to clean off spikes and things like that, and to make sure that when we do snow removal on the field, which can be the most significant mode of transport for crumb rubber off the field, that it's going into a designated controlled area such that when that snow melts, that crumb rubber can be reclaimed and put back onto the field. And we'll be doing every last one of these things for this design. And just so you're aware, these suggestions are largely common practice, but these suggestions come specifically from the European Sports Federation for how they manage their turf fields. Next slide, please. So I want to go through a little bit of what exactly are we talking about here when we're talking about the system of a new turf field. So let's start from the top and work our way down. At the top, we have the artificial grass and the infill that's in it. So that is that particulate that you see in the green grass. And that grass is held up and adhered to a membrane, very similar to carpet backing that you would see in your house. That carpet backing does not allow any crumb rubber, the physical crumb rubber itself, to get through it. Underneath that carpet is a shock pad. This improves playability and helps with keeping the turf in good working condition. And similarly, it has no way for the artificial or the fill to get through down to the lower layers. Underneath the shock pad, you have a bonding layer, a leveling layer, and then a subbase. And the important thing to know about all these layers, although they're colored differently, is that they are all stone based, and they're just different sizes of stone to help us get ever finer level control as we move up and provide good drainage down to the drainage system below. And that's the yellow pipes that you see below. Drainage pipes running across the screen are fingers going out into the field, and they collect down to large pipes that run around the entire perimeter of the field. And we'll talk more about that in the next slide, but I want to stress here that there is no way that crumb rubber can get down to that level. The carpet and the shock pad limit it. Next slide, please. Okay, so we've talked a lot about reviewing the system. This is our design, but we haven't talked very much about what is this system. And this traditional turf field drainage system we're describing now is what's included in the cost for the project right now and what the design team is suggesting to the district to implement. What does this system actually do with stormwater? How does it handle anything that comes down through the turf into the stormwater? What does it do with that water? Is it just dumping it out onto the site? Is it dumping it into the waterways? What are we talking about here? So I'm going to walk through this system and another system and tell you what's actually happening with the water. So the first thing to note with any of these systems is that because the carpet is so porous, and because the drainage layers below it are so porous, any rain or water that gets to the field, be it from rain, runoff, or otherwise, goes down. And it's going to go down and it's going to collect into the collector system below. Now, what's important about the system that we have designed is that the green dashed line is a permeable barrier. Okay, and why is that important? It's important because it allows some of that water that comes down to infiltrate down into the ground. And that might sound like an iffy proposition. Why do I want this to infiltrate down into the ground? But the existing site and the earth there is an excellent repository for this, any material that come down into, because the existing biology and bacteria in the soil actually transmutes and changes those pollutants into clean soil. And the more you can use your site to do that work for you, the better. So any of that water that doesn't infiltrate down, and we do have relatively clay-heavy soils in this location, so it won't be a ton of percolation down into the ground. But if it doesn't get down into the ground, it's going to get into those collector pipes, and it's going to go out to what we call a stormwater facility via the large collector pipe at the bottom of the page. And we'll talk a little bit more about what those stormwater facilities are in a couple slides. So let's move on to the next slide, where we'll talk about a different take on this. And that would be doing an impenetrable or an impermeable liner, the yellow line, all the way underneath the field. The one difference from the previous slide and this slide is you'll notice there are no blue water lines going down into the ground, right? This impermeable barrier, this yellow line, will take all the water that falls onto the field, direct it through the drainage system, through the collector pipe, and out to the stormwater facility. Now, in the previous design, we saw that some of that quality control work was being done effectively by the ground, and that we were only sending the water that we needed to the stormwater facility. Thus, it could be a smaller facility. With this design, the impermeable liner, we're taking all the water that falls on the site and we're sending it to that facility. That facility is going to have to be larger to accommodate it, and we are basically turning our back on the ground to do the work that it does best. And there are significant cost upgrades to do this liner, upwards of $400,000 to do it. And as a design team and as the district, we don't see a measurable difference in benefit to the quality of the groundwater, the stormwater coming out of the system. We don't see the benefit to add this. We think that the infiltration that is going to be able to happen in the previous design is very beneficial. It's going to reduce the size of our stormwater facility, and it's going to allow us to use the ground as much as we can to do that work, which is more cost effective and follows all of DEC's requirements for what we do with stormwater from a site. And it's important to note that the water gets, any water that's on a site, right? It's getting items and things from the environment. So we tend to engineer systems for parking lots, say. And a parking lot, you'll see, will grade off, and that water will go into a green area typically. And that's because we want all that runoff to be treated by the ground before it's sent to stormwater facilities and out into the environment. It's very similar here, where we want to use the ground as much as possible. So let's talk about, what do I mean when I say stormwater facilities? Next slide, please. So the best example I've got for this is, imagine a very big Brita filter. And any water that doesn't infiltrate into the ground in our traditional system, or any water at all that comes from the groundwater system, will be brought to this facility. It will be filtered for all particulate matter, and then it'll be forced back up through the filters and be put out the other side as DEC specified cleanliness of water to be released into waterways or storm facilities. And I want to hit that point really particularly. No matter what comes through the turf, whether it's born of the turf or whether it's born of the environment, because there's a lot of parking lots, there's a lot of roads. This is going to have other things on it that are going to get through it. Everything here is regulated by the DEC, both its infiltration into the ground and its treatment by this facility. And the quality of that water coming out of the treatment facility is very finely controlled. And we'll be making sure that it does that. And that's what the DEC mandates of designs, mandates it of any site design, not just a turf. So we are not necessarily special there. So before I move on, before I hand this back to Judy, are there any questions that I can answer or that we can answer collectively about the turf field?
Drew, I have a quick question about the slide that's up right now, the jellyfish filter configurations. Is that something that is currently part of the project, or is that an addition that we could add on?
So this filter component, and my apologies and thank you for the cue, this is going to be a part of either of our designs.
Okay.
The size of it will be the thing. And let me tell you a little bit about why. So if we had enough space on the site, a traditional stormwater facility would be a retention pond that would collect that water and give it time to infiltrate that down in the ground and allowing the earth to do all the things that we need to do here. But because we're on a relatively tight site with lots of fields around us, no matter what, we're going to need something like this. Now, with the lined system that has that impenetrable barrier that's going to send all the water to this device, that's going to be the largest that device can possibly be. And we have a relatively good handle on how big that is. What we don't have a good handle on, though we have provisional costing for, is this item in the traditional design. And why don't we know what the size of it is just yet? Well, we need to do what's called a Perk Test on the site to figure out how much water can infiltrate into the site and really understand what the weather patterns are and what a 100-year storm looks like, and design for those conditions, both infiltration, the ability of the subbase to hold water back for us, to then calibrate how big this filter configuration would be for the traditional design. But this will be a component of either. If we go with a liner system, we're anticipating a small bump in cost to do a larger unit, and that's included in the $400,000 price tag that I quoted for the liner system. And that's largely, just so we're clear, that's largely the liner itself, and then a small, well, a nominal upcharge for a slightly larger filter configuration for the jellyfish.
Does that mean that if you go with the liner, you're talking about a $925,000 project?
Yeah, if we go with the liner, that's adding $400,000 to the $5,250,000.
So you're talking 5.65 rather than 5.25?
Yeah, so right now, that 5.25 number includes provisions for a smaller one of these, and again, we will calibrate its size, but we anticipate that there's going to be a small upcharge to go to the liner system on the size of this unit, and then the cost of the liner itself equal that 400,000. So you add that 400,000 to the 250,000, and you get 5,625,000.
If you're understanding that this field is a clay field, and that clay is not draining, and that's the reason why the proposal to put turf in is here. Since the filtration of clay is limited, and that's why we have a sloppy field, how is the ground going to do any of the filtration?
I'm sorry, could someone closer to the mic encapsulate that for me? I think I got it, but I didn't get all of it.
How is the ground? You talked about the ground doing filtration.
Yes.
How is this clay ground going to do filtration? Which, one of the reasons why we're being asked to put a turf field in is so that we don't have, we're not playing on flooded fields.
Certainly, yeah, this is a common question in these arenas. So, the reason that we have wet fields now is we do have very clay-rich soils here. But when it rains, it percolates very, 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 very slowly. It's not that it doesn't infiltrate into the ground, it just takes its sweet time. That has repercussions for a field where the clay is right below the level of the grass, right? If we can go back a couple of slides, Brittany. One more. So in this instance, we're taking the layer where that water needs to infiltrate and getting it well below the field, right? So by doing that, we're actually giving it a place to go, i.e. this entire subbase layer, and we're giving it the time to actually infiltrate more slowly. So it's not right at the surface. So that's the main difference. We're actually giving it a place to go, and by giving it that place, we're giving it the time to slowly percolate into the ground. Now, that doesn't mean that nothing is going to go to the stormwater facility, right? It just means that we're giving that water a better chance, but it's not going to be able to do 100% of the work.
How deep are you digging to get down to that layer?
We're saying that it's about 2 feet below grade for the subbase layer.
And when they put the original drainage in, how deep did they put that drainage?
Originally?
Well, the last bond issue where we had drainage on those fields put in.
That frankly, I am not sure.
Yes, so we have, am I on? Yes. We had main lines put on either side of the field, and then we did what we called a Sandmaster application because we needed the field in service. So this is something where we could improve the soil characteristics and the drainage characteristics of the field by putting these slots of sand in it, and the field recovered much quickly than going in and putting drainage piping. Okay, so just to be clear on a couple of things here, there's going to be a network of piping, okay, that's going to collect all of this water underneath the field, okay? You do, Jonathan, you're correct that, with clay, the perk characteristics are nowhere near like sand, but you do have some perk characteristics, and that's why Drew mentioned that we'd have to do a perk test. We're going to have to look at the topography of around the area to make sure that, do we dig down, do we raise it up? We're going to have to look at all of that. And then from that's going to determine the size of one of the treatment facilities, or not the treatment facilities, but the stormwater facilities there that we're going to add. So within just the base design, there is a level of treatment, of a stormwater facility, okay? So if we want to line the bottom with an impermeable layer that we talked about, that's where a lot of that $400,000 add comes in. So nothing perks into the ground, it goes all into the piping, all over to the stormwater management facility.
How deep do you have to dig to put that layer in? In other words, how much of the field are you going to take off the top to put that impermeable layer in?
As Drew said, probably about 2 feet.
And below that, you're going to have to dig for piping and stone.
Yeah.
And you're going to have to put stone in below that, right? So how deep is you're taking 2 feet out to the layer, and then how much further are you taking out for piping or whatever else you have to dig?
So Drew, I think we talked, these collection pipes, how big? I think we talked 6-8 inches.
Yeah, they're 6 to 8 inches, and you can kind of look at the diagram. That perimeter drain where the collector pipe runs around, the larger one, that's probably going to be another 2-foot slot all the way around.
Could we go back to the slide that had the green grass on the top, please? Okay. that shows stone where the piping is. So is that stone just around where the piping is, or it's through the whole field? Is that stone going to be in the whole field or just around the edges? Because I would think if you're going to be collecting in those pipes, you're going to need stone around it, which means that you're going to have to dig down not only the 2 feet to that layer, but you're going to have to dig down further for the stone.
Yeah, so again, we haven't gotten into this much detail yet. A lot of it's going to depend. This is all going to be by gravity. So the question is, where is this treatment facility going to be placed? What is its invert? What type of slope do we have getting there?
Okay, let me just get to the point I'm trying to make here, which is, if you're going to dig down, at least so far I've heard 4 feet, and from that diagram, probably a little deeper, why not dig out the 4 feet for the entire field, put in a sand or well-drained field so we can have a natural field?
Yeah, actually, I'd like to address that, and I noticed that my landscape designer, Adler, is also here, and I'd like him to talk a little bit about the pipes and the possibility of amending the soil further down.
Well, Drew, can we go to the next slide that shows the field? I think I just want to clear up the field section. What's shown on this slide is the typical field cross-section, and it's only shown at the sideline. At the middle of the field, the stone base is going to be about 6 to 8 inches thick. What we have is that the turf portion of the field will pitch at about 0.5%. The subgrade will pitch at 1.5%. So what happens is it's 8 inches in the middle, and it tapers to about 16 to 18 inches along the perimeter just above the collector drain. So you get well draining, the field is well draining below the surface. The turf is just the playing surface. It could go in level, it could go in at 1%, but it's so permeable the water will just go right through it to the subgrade. Typically when we do these fields, or let's say every time we do these fields, we get a geotechnical report done by a geotechnical engineer who goes out, they do multiple tests throughout the field to get an understanding of the subgrade conditions. And then they know, the geotechnical engineer knows we're doing the turf field, and they give us recommendations on how we need to prep the field for the turf field. If we have to do undercuts, if we have to do any amendments, we'll get a good understanding of what needs to be done to install this field properly so you get the longest life out of this field.
So I think, Jonathan, to answer your question, we were not asked to look at a design for a natural grass field, okay, or what it would take to do that, or even cost it out. We strictly were looking at a design of a synthetic turf field. Are there other questions?
Any other questions?
I don't think we're taking.
These are just questions at this point from the board. There will be an opportunity for public comment later in the meeting.
To you, Judy.
Okay, if we have no more comments from the board, I'd like to hand it back over to Judy.
So if you can advance to the money slide. So what we have presented here is the initial project amount. We have included the additions that Greg had noted as the subtotal part 1 for about $1,999,000. Given the concerns that were voiced by the board about the middle school outdoor teaching area, we had shown that as a subtraction from the scope. Obviously, if you wish to include that, that would change this total, but this is really intended just to give you an example of how the economics of the project would work. The subtotal Part 2 for the 1,186,000 is the other elements that Greg had delineated. And then finally, the recommendation for the charging infrastructure for the electric buses is the 1,855,000. So if that was all approved by the board, that would give us a total of just shy of $40.7 million. What makes this project so unique and why it in fact is going to be budget neutral for the community is, as we had detailed at a prior meeting, with the federal monies available to us through the American Rescue Plan and the elementary and secondary emergency relief funds, we have close to $2.4 million available to cover the costs of a number of the different project components. We have some technological components of the project. The tech upgrades are eligible for federal E-rate funding, and based on what's included in those totals, that would be about $543,000. We also have $15.1 million available to us in our capital reserves, where we have allotted surpluses over the last few years into those reserves, specifically to use to reduce the amount of debt that we would have to issue on these projects. Based on a $40.7 million project, we would only need to draw down $13.4 million out of those reserves, which would simply give us $1.7 million that we could put towards the next capital project, because as you know, one of our goals, everything wears out over time, and we want to have these periodic projects so that we can make sure that we maintain our facilities in good working order. The largest piece of funding for the projects comes from our New York State building aid formulas, where 70%, based on our current aid ratios, flows back to the district in the form of building aid. So with those various components, we can essentially align the sources of funding pretty closely to the amount that we will be spending. And remember that this all isn't paid out in a single year. Both the expenditures for the debt service on these bonds and then the receipt of the building aid flows to us over a 15-year period. So it's really close to 1/15 of these amounts that would be going in as a source of funds and a use of funds in each year that the project is in repayment status. Okay. So on the next slide, so really what we need to resolve this evening, if we are going to stick to the timeline that allows us to give the lead time for all of the project design work that still has to occur, to allow for the SED reviews, and then to get us bidding out this work and then awarding it at the most favorable time. We would need to finalize the scope and cost, hopefully this evening, which would then allow us, assuming we get a quick response on those seeker notices, that we could actually approve the project resolution September 1st, at the latest on the 22nd. So the key things would be the outdoor teaching area. Do you wish to keep that, or do you wish to remove it? The synthetic turf, are you comfortable with the information that we have provided, and do you wish to keep that within the existing scope as is recommended? Can we add in the infrastructure for the electric buses so that we put in that underground charging capabilities for the future installation of those charging stations? And then is there anything else that you wish to either add or delete from this project scope? So once we know that information, then we're prepared to, later on in the evening, take the action to designate our intention to be the lead agency. So we do not need to make these decisions right now. I know we have many members of the public also that would like to make comment about this, and I know the board wishes to consider those comments as well. So just so that you keep this in mind, this is the end goal, is to make these decisions for this evening. And then on the next slide, again, is just a quick recap of our timeline for the project. So ideally, if we adopt the seeker resolution this evening, we get a quick response, we can actually approve the project authorization resolution and the legal ads at the September 1st meeting. We tentatively are scheduling a community forum on the evening of September 13th, where we can kind of do a recap of all of the many elements that we've covered over these last few months and make sure the community is aware of exactly what is included in the project. Then we would communicate that out to the public in our bond newsletter that we release with other information for those who might not have been following it closely. And then the tentative referendum date would be October 19th, based on a September 1st project approval. Okay?
Judy, will the community forum also be a time for community members to ask questions?
Holly, I cannot hear you.
Sorry. I don't know if it's not on. I was just asking Judy if the community forum would also be a chance for the community to ask questions that they have about the project.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we've been taking questions all along in the form of phone calls, emails, and, the goal is to communicate clearly what is in the project, why we're recommending the various elements for inclusion, and yes, we want folks to understand it and get their answers.
If we don't hear from SED and the DEC before the September 1st meeting, does it push the community forum out 2 weeks as well? Does it just move the whole timeline?
Possibly. It's hard to lock in on a date. I think even if we did, they're likely to come back with a no. That's what we're expecting. But if we don't hear from them, then we have to wait the full 30 days by law, which is why that timeline would be pushed. So we would have to evaluate that and make that decision by the September 1st meeting.
I think we're going to hold our discussion on these items until after our public comment section, but does anybody have any questions on the presentation? Any board members?
I did have one more question for Greg. On the middle school design, was it changed from the original design? Or was it the one that was presented to us previously?
The one that was presented.
Okay.
Seeing no additional.
I do have.
Oh, you have one more question?
Just a quick question. Greg, you mentioned when we added in the electric buses infrastructure, you said this is a high priority, and some of the other things we talked about were medium priorities. I just want to make sure I understand what we've listed as a medium priority, that perhaps now that we're adding in this larger EV infrastructure, or that we perhaps are going to add that, if there is something that we wanted to take out, can you remind us of what those medium priorities were?
Yes. I broke them down into basically three categories. The one was fire alarm upgrades, and they were at 4 schools. Eagle, Hammergrill, Slingerlands, and the middle school. And then the next was miscellaneous exterior envelope. And these were all identified on that, the medium priorities a sheet that we sent to the board. Various masonry work, some toilet room renovations. And then the third recommendation was various mechanical and plumbing upgrades.
Any other questions? Seeing no additional questions on this presentation, we'll turn to our second presentation, also by you, Judy
Yes.
Kehoe.
Yes.
On the 2021-2022 tax rates. And just before you get started, just a reminder to everybody, I know it is hot in here, but we do need you to keep your masks over your noses and your mouths. Thanks.
So I don't want to hear groans from the audience that we're doing a financial presentation on tax rates. This is a good news presentation, and I promise to be very brief. We had projected what the tax rates were going to be when we released the budget newsletter, and the good news is that the rates are going to be even lower than what we had projected, and it will in fact result in a tax decrease for all residents, whether they are in Bethlehem or in New Scotland. So this slide, part of tonight's action is also to approve the year-end report on our reserves, which is contain the restricted components of our fund balance. We've talked about these regularly. Most of these totals are in line with what we had talked about as part of the budget process. We, in fact, have a lower surplus than we had projected. The surplus for this year, unaudited, is $4,258,000. So that is the increase between the 23.2 for total fund balance up to the 27.4. And knowing that we were projecting to have higher income and knowing that we needed to control our undesignated fund balance component to keep that under 4%, if you recall, we had authorized some additional expenditures, including the GPS telematics work for the buses. Since we were not going to finance that, that is included within our encumbrances at the end of the year, as well as a card access security system panel replacement is included in those year-end encumbrances. And then we also had ordered some additional classroom furniture, again anticipating the need to move away from table-based settings and to get the social distancing if we're bringing everybody back into the schools. So routinely, we're around the $200,000 mark for the year-end encumbrances. The reason it is higher is because we were controlling the amount of that surplus. But all of the other reserves are as we had talked about, and the undesignated fund balance percentage is at 3.34%, so well within the 4% limitation. Okay. So as we go on the next slide, we have multiple components of this. Of course, the tax levy is the amount that the school district will be collecting, and that amount is about $515,000. That does not, though, correspond to the tax rate. That is the amount that individual taxpayers will pay applied to their assessed values. And of course, all of the levy as we set it and these decisions are all in compliance with the tax cap formula for those limitations. If you go to the next slide, you can see that in these years past, we have been coming in at or below our maximum allowable tax levy. This year was at 1.61% that we could have levied, but because we had the other infusion of cash coming in from the state through the governor's budget this year, we were able to only increase the levy by 0.75%. Okay. So if we look to what the actual tax rates are going to be in this coming year, there was a shift in the equalization rate. The Bethlehem rate actually dropped from 95% down to 93%. New Scotland remained the same at 91%. And what those percentages do is essentially adjust between the two different communities where they have different assessment levels on the homes. Because there are two towns included within the school district, if we didn't use those equalization rates, you would have an unfair allocation of that tax levy between the various communities. So based on the calculations, we're actually looking at a 0.13% decrease in the tax rate for Bethlehem residents and a larger decrease of 2.23% for New Scotland. And the reason why their decrease is lower is because their EQ rate did not change and Bethlehem's dropped down. So the impact for a $250,000 home would be a $7 decrease in Bethlehem, assuming no other changes in exemptions, and a $125 decrease for New Scotland. Okay. So this next slide just gives you a quick explanation of how these equalization rates work. So as noted, if you have equal homes, just the only difference is one is in the town of Bethlehem and one is in the town of New Scotland. By applying those equalization rates to the full market value, you come down to what the actual assessed value is. So in this example, based on those current EQ rates, the identical home in Bethlehem would be assessed, or would be assessed at $232,500. The New Scotland home would be at $227,000. The reason their tax rate is higher than Bethlehem's is to adjust for those differences in the market values. So when you apply that, you can see the taxes due on a $250,000 valued home would be the same, $5,002. Again, the adjustments for the assessed values is all factored into the rates so that it is equitable between the two communities. Okay. So we will be releasing these tax bills so that they arrive in everybody's mailboxes or with their escrow companies by or on or around September 1st. And we are very grateful to Pioneer Bank, who once again is accepting payments for anybody who wants to get that peace of mind of bringing their payment into the bank and getting a receipt right then and there. At the Delmar location and the Glenmont office are their two choices. Their hours are listed on our website as well. The Glenmont branch also has Saturday hours, which has been received very well by the community. All payments will need to be made by September 30th to avoid the 2% penalty. Anything that is postmarked or received between October 1st and November 1st has to include the 2% penalty. So the website has information as well. If you want to pay your bills using a credit card or an ACH, you can go there for that information. And again, we want to make it easy as possible to get this information, to take a little bit of the sting out of the tax bill, which I know nobody likes to get in their mailboxes. We do have a dedicated phone line, so if anybody has any questions about their tax bill or rates or escrow questions or anything, that number, which is also on our website, will get you directly into Michelle Curtis, our tax collector, and she will help you out. So that, did I promise you it would be quick, is everything on the tax rates. So if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer those.
Does anybody have any questions for Judy? Thank
No.
you.
All right, you're welcome.
Next up on our agenda is our recognition of public comment on an agenda item. Before we get started with that, I did just want to make a comment that, I know that the board has not received in the past couple of weeks, not all of the emails coming in were coming into everybody. So for the public, if there was an email that you sent that did not get a response right away, if there was a delay, that is likely the reason. We have a workaround and for right now and are working on fixing that issue. But because we have a workaround, please don't feel like if you send an email, you need to resend it. They have all ultimately come in. It's just about response time. And before we take comments from people that are here, we did have one comment that was emailed in with respect to vaccination. Kate Gaffney asked if it's possible to know the percentage of staff that have been vaccinated within the district, and if we have any information about the percentage of eligible students that have been vaccinated. Jody, I didn't know if you have that information.
Right. So currently, based on our information, we have about 75% of our staff who are fully vaccinated. And again, some people aren't working over the summer, so there could be people who've been vaccinated, have not reported it to HR. For the students, the information we have really is from the end of the school year. We are sending out information about immunizations that students need to have and asking parents if they've had their child vaccinated over the summer to please contact our nursing offices so we can update that information. But I wouldn't really be that confident in the information we have for students. Obviously, none of our elementary students are eligible, so it's a much smaller percentage with our student population, but we will have that before the beginning of the school year, or hopefully as parents report it.
Thank you. And now is the time, if you would like to address the board, to come forward. This is the first time that we have had this many people visiting our meetings in a long time. So just as a refresher, in accordance with board policy, The board does value and welcome civil and respectful statements to the board. The board uses public comment as an opportunity to listen to community concerns, but will not debate issues or enter into a question and answer session. Speakers are permitted to speak for 3 minutes. And in a public session, the board does not permit discussion of individual district personnel or students. And all speakers must conduct themselves in a civil manner. Obscene language, libelous statements, threats of violence, or statements advocating racial, religious, or other forms of prejudice will not be tolerated. So with that, if you could, when you come up, if you could please state your full name and then address the board.
Am I allowed to take my mask off? No?
You should keep it on.
Okay. Hello, members of the Board of Education. I'm Sophia Soka, a rising senior at Bethlehem High School. I'm a goalie for the girls varsity soccer team, a sprinter and jumper for the indoor and outdoor track team, as well as the Bethlehem Student Senate president. Therefore, I'm speaking to you today as not only a student athlete, but here representing the Bethlehem student body as a whole. On the behalf of all Bethlehem students, I fully support the proposal to build a turf field at Bethlehem and urge the board to do the same. A turf field would unequivocally benefit the students of Bethlehem High School and would be an invaluable resource not only to the sports teams but all students. There are multiple occasions each year when planned phys ed classes are not able to go outside due to the fields because of rain, either that night or the morning of phys ed class. There's been multiple talks about getting a turf field, and none of them have gone through. That's why I believe this should be a high priority issue for the board in order to get a turf field approved and put into the school quickly. Another example beyond phys ed classes is in the fall of 2019, the girls flag football tournament was canceled due to the fear that it would ruin the football field before homecoming. If we had a turf field, this would never be an issue, and multiple teams, including one that I was on, were devastated that the tournament was canceled due to the lack of facilities here at school. In addition, turf fields would enable our sports teams to practice and play regardless of weather conditions, under the best conditions possible, and under conditions in which our surrounding competitive schools have the benefit of. It is a competitive disadvantage to our teams to not be able to have the same conditions as the teams we compete against. As a goalie, I appreciate firsthand the difference between playing on turf and grass fields, in such a difference that it makes when our soccer team plays during playoff games, we actually bus to Clifton Park, 45-minute drive, so that we're able to practice on turf fields in order to simulate gameplay that we know we're going to be playing during playoff games. As I'm sure you can imagine, this is not only an annoying and difficult bus ride, but it takes away valuable time from the teammates and student athletes that they could then be focusing that time on their studies rather than transporting to facilities that we need. Once we put in turf fields, which we need, we will no longer have to travel outside of Bethlehem and shorten our practice times with practice conditions and resources possible. Not only will a turf field help the student body, it would also reduce maintenance costs, save the maintenance staff time, promote longer life of equipment in our district, and also decrease our footprint on the environment with no emissions from lawnmowers and water needed for the fields, with a measurable and positive impact on the environment. I recognize I will never have the opportunity to play on the fields I'm advocating for today, but I feel I owe the younger and future students of Bethlehem the opportunity to have the turf fields and compete on the same level playing fields with their peers in neighboring towns. I'm simply asking you today to give Bethlehem the same resources that other districts have had for years in order to better suit the needs of our students. On behalf of the entire student body, a turf field in place of the existing fields will not only benefit our sports programs, but our entire student body. I'm happy, well, you can't answer questions, but thank you for your time and consideration today.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments.
Hi, I'm Jeff Brown. I'm a community member and proud parent of 3 Bethlehem Central alumni and an former Ellesmere substitute teacher. In 2013, Tom Douglas and a different board proposed an artificial turf field, but ultimately decided to split their bond to include artificial turf. Bond issue number 1 of needed items passed by only 57%. Bond number 2 for the turf was rejected by 65% of the voters. Superintendents and boards do change, but taxpayers have long memories. The 2013 bond called for $3 million for turf. The community thought that was excessive and now sees that the board is asking for more than $5 million for turf, lighting, and bleachers. According to my math, if it's correct, Mrs. Kehoe, that represents about 14 to 15% of the total bond cost. I think that's disproportionate. It represents more financial investment in this bond than some of our elementary schools combined. Artificial turf is a want, not a need or a mandate. I urge you to tailor this bond that deals more with things our schools need to maintain the learning environment for all students. If the 2013 bond had passed, the current board tonight would be discussing how to allocate funds for the $130,000 approximate disposal of the carpet and a $500,000 purchase of a new carpet. Now, the investment in turf would have cost us well over the initial bond cost, $600,000. And I think also when facilities from Bethlehem Central are rented out to community organizations, a profit is not generated. I think just the costs are met. The 2016 bond did not include turf. If this board determines that it wants to include artificial turf again, I urge you to do what the board did in 2013, split the bond so that this luxury won't jeopardize the approval of other items that are so much more necessary for the upkeep of our facilities and for the education of our students. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let me just lower this to my level here. Good evening. My name is Siobhan Sheehan Rosenkrantz. I'm a lifelong member of the community and the Field Hockey Booster Club president. Coach Austin wasn't able to attend tonight, so I will be speaking on behalf of our program. I promise to be brief. First of all, we would like to thank the Board of Education. It's clear that everyone here cares deeply for our students' overall health and well-being, as well as the communities. That being said, we are concerned that personal agendas are clouding the decision-making process with regards to keeping the turf in the capital project, so we'd like to address 2 very important points. First, with regard to the health and safety risks associated with artificial turf, Mr. Nolte reviewed the Department of Health study which showed there is no difference in injury rates when sports are played on turf versus grass. There are no confirmed health hazards with artificial turf. Additionally, a study done in 2011 by the National Institute of Health and published in the National Library of Medicine summarized, quote, outdoor and indoor synthetic turf fields are not associated with elevated adverse events. And finally, in 2019, the EPA released their report looking at tire crumb rubber and found that, quote, while chemicals are present as expected in the tire crumb rubber, human exposure appears to be limited based on what is released into air or simulated biological fluids. Now, I'm no scientist, but I have worked in the medical and health and science field for over 20 years. The New York State Department of Health, the National Institution of Health, and the Environmental Protection Agency are 3 big guns. None of them have yet to find increased health hazards with outdoor artificial turf. That's probably why there are more than 12,000 synthetic turfs that exist in the United States, with 1,200 more fields being installed each year. That is the science. Our second point is with regard to field hockey. Now, I went to Bethlehem High School. I didn't play field hockey. I certainly wasn't that talented. However, I have learned a whole lot since, so please let me share what I've learned. Plain and simple, field hockey is best played on artificial turf. It's one of the few sports where the entire game is played with constant contact between the ball and the surface. A smooth, flat surface ensures the proper speed, distance, and trajectory of the rolling ball. Different skills are required to play on turf versus grass. These skills are taught by our coaches, but cannot be consistently practiced. Bethlehem Central is one of the only schools in the Suburban Council, soon to be the only school, that doesn't have turf for field hockey. In order for our team to prepare for away games, the Booster Club, which is funded by tax-paying parents, pays for turf time at a rate of about $85 an hour, plus the cost of transportation, which far outweighs that. We also need to rent space when our fields are wet, so which is basically any given day in October, because as we all know, our fields are saturated even after the lightest rain shower. Do the math. In order for all our players to learn the skills necessary to compete with our friends in the Suburban Council, we have to pay thousands of dollars out of pocket and transport them off-site. We are at a strong disadvantage, and this is incredibly unfair to these student athletes who want to play a fair game and may want to play one day in college. Finally, our fear is that turf could be the required playing surface in the future. This would mean that we would need to search for and pay for a turf field to rent, or worse, discontinue the program. Again, I didn't play field hockey, and maybe the program isn't important to you personally, but currently, between youth, modified, JV, and varsity teams, we have 100 female athletes that would be affected by this decision. Again, we thank you for your very careful consideration. We hope that you're encouraged by the science supported by the Department of Health, the EPA, and the National Institute of Health. We trust that you will consider our field hockey student athletes who want to play a fair game now and in the future, and we implore you to include the turf field in the capital project. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Violet MacDonald, and this fall I'm going to be a junior. August 23rd will begin my third year on the girls' varsity field hockey team. If you're not familiar with the sport, I'm sure you at least have a basic understanding of physics. If you picture yourself trying to roll a 3-inch ball around on a smooth, even surface, and then picture yourself rolling it over a thick field of grass, I'm sure you will quickly realize how relevant the turf versus grass argument is for field hockey specifically. While the grass on the field hockey field is consistently mowed, and we appreciate that, there is nothing to be done about the thickness of the grass or the divots that are created during gameplay. The woeful drainage of the field has caused many canceled or delayed practices and games, including the cancellation of our final game of an already shortened Fall 2 season. Coaches from other schools have called into question the legitimacy of the outcomes of games because of the substandard conditions of our wet fields. Fortunately, even with these wet fields, our Booster Club is willing to shell out thousands of dollars to buy us some turf time at AFRMS when our fields are soaking wet. Although we are grateful for AFRMS and the opportunity it provides, AFRMS is not lined for field hockey. We are not able to hold effective practices there, and we are forced to set up the necessary lines on the field with cones, which we're all tripping over constantly. I truly cannot say enough about the difference between playing this sport on grass as opposed to turf. It's honestly a different game. On a turf field, the playing is fast-paced and the ball is moved across the field in the blink of an eye. The games that we've played on grass, however, are slow and not an accurate representation of what our team is capable of. You'll never turn on a TV and see a college team playing on turf, and if by some chance you do, I promise you that that field has been carefully curated to the needs of field hockey players. Field hockey before us asked to have access to the stadium for our senior night, but we were told that the grass needs to be long to cater to the needs of the football players. Although I understand prioritizing safety in high-contact sports, it's been consistently discouraging to miss out on the opportunity to fill a stadium with family and friends. If we had a turf, this would be a non-issue and we would have access to it. There would be higher quality play, and it would be a true senior night under the lights, and not a senior late afternoon, since we're forced to play at approximately 5 p.m. where parents are rushing home from work. It's not the true experience. As female athletes, we are always trying to increase popularity in our sport, and it's saddening to encounter obstacles that other local high schools don't have to face. I'm very grateful to live in a school district that tries to constantly better its facilities and inspires students to participate in what they feel passionate about. We've been fortunate to enjoy the new library and auditorium that advances both academic and creative interests. I appreciate the opportunities that the Board of Education has given students, allowing us to be great, and I would love to see student athletes gain a similar opportunity to reach our full potential. I think it's a bit easier to approve a plan and take on the challenges that arise when it affects you firsthand. So next time it rains, I implore anyone who is leaning away from installing a turf to please grab a field hockey stick and ball and dribble up and down for an hour. I think it may change your mind. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Phoebe Hosford and I'm a rising senior at Bethlehem and play on the varsity soccer and lacrosse teams. Tonight I will be speaking on behalf of the girls lacrosse program. There are several reasons as to why I believe that a turf field would be extremely beneficial to our school community. Tonight I will be highlighting a few that I find to be the most important. Here at Bethlehem we have several varsity teams that are highly competitive in the Suburban Council. The varsity girls lacrosse team has recently won a Class A Section 2 championship and finished as a state semifinalist in 2019, our last full season. Despite being one of the most competitive schools in the area athletically, our lack of turf has proved to be a large disadvantage. Every other district in the area that we compete with has or is in the process of building a turf field. This means that they practice and are more comfortable on the turf. This is one major advantage that they have over us. Lacrosse is a different game on turf versus grass. The ball moves much faster, as does the pace of the game. Being a team that practices and plays on turf fields, it is very difficult to travel to other schools for games and make the quick adjustments to turf conditions. This also leaves us at a disadvantage. Furthermore, due to the totally unpredictable weather that upstate New York brings and the poor drainage conditions of our grass fields, practices are constantly being canceled, shortened, or adjusted, especially in the spring. This again leaves our teams at a disadvantage. We lose practice time and the ability to maintain our level of play to compete with other teams. Drainage is the cause of many cancellations and adjustments of our practices and game times. Oftentimes, practices will be moved indoors or to other turf facilities around Bethlehem, where the BC Lacrosse Booster Club graciously pays for us to play. However, traveling up to 15 minutes out of the way just to practice takes time away from schoolwork and family, as well as putting young drivers behind the wheel for longer than necessary. A turf field at the high school would save both time and money. As a senior, I will not have the opportunity to play on this field. However, it is very important to me and my fellow seniors that the future BC teams have the ability to play and compete alongside the top schools in the area, which turf would allow for. I hope you see how having a turf field at our school will benefit our teams and school community. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Hello, board members. Thank you for your time today. My name is Varad Rajulu. I'm here as a former hockey player and a parent of 2 hockey players and an advocate of hockey as a sport at large. So I played this game for 20 years and I played on different artificial turf, both in India where I grew up and in the US playing for a club. And my daughters have been playing this sport for almost 5 years in the turf. I really don't see any problems, that I know of. So I have no reservations of playing in this turf for hockey. So, you probably, if you've watched Olympics, which is just concluded, and hockey is a very fast-paced game. And it's getting more faster because of rule changes and so forth. Playing grass, we already at disadvantage. We just can't compete. And you expect kids to go from middle school to high school and transition from grass to AstroTurf. I can guarantee you the catching up is going to be impossible because that's you don't have speed. Again, as others spoke, the game is so different. So it's important for us to really play the game on a turf, which is what the whole world is playing, if you want to play competitive hockey. So I want to give you a statistics, right? I was looking at the U.S. women's hockey roster, right? 35 players were picked. Out of 35, 21 is from the state of Pennsylvania. They came through the Pennsylvania school system. And And again, why can't we get to that level, right? So we hardly have 3 kids, I think 3 players from New York State playing there. So it has to start. It has to start by exposing them to the artificial turf where the game is played. So, they need a playing level field. So I really agree with what others spoke about that. And lastly, I have 2 daughters. They are in middle school. It's been very hard for the last 5+ years to keep them engaged in hockey, because hockey is very near to me, very dear to me, and I really follow this game till today. So whenever I ask them, can you go out and play, if it's grass, they just say no. And I do worry that they will give up that sport, which I care about a lot. I mean, they do like it, but they love it playing on the turf, which we play elsewhere outside the district. And so I really request the board to give our daughters and sons a fair chance, because so that they can really compete and go on play for the college, maybe for the U.S. team. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Harold Adler. I live in Delmar. My wife and I, 45 years, live with a son-in-law, a daughter, and 2 grandkids. The oldest one is 6 years old. Now, I don't know what I'm talking about because I'm not in the field of medicine. My daughter is a physician attending at Albany Medical Center and a professor at the Albany Medical School. Son-in-law is a research scientist, and my wife is an advanced practice nurse and certified nurse midwife. But I'm the one talking about health here. And I sent a copy of an email to both the superintendent and to the assistant superintendent and the head of special ed, because her granddaughter, who's 6, has some special needs, but she's doing great. In any event, my background, I've been a lawyer for 17 years, and I started a lawsuit in 1979 which established the right of handicapped children with conditions to an education. It's a big federal class action. It set everything up. And since then, I've been a Supreme Court judge in New York State for 27 years. The reason I'm addressing you, and I'm doing it gently as possible, is the board, I think the decisions have been made, but they'll be probably finalized tomorrow, that for children who are not vaccinated, we're talking about life and death. These are kids who are 11 or so and under. There should be an option for parents to have virtual learning, at least until we can vaccinate these children. For those parents, the few probably who still want their kids to be at home. Talk to any professional who works in a hospital, even Albany Medical Center. We can go to the emergency room and wait 11 hours to get help unless it's an absolute emergency. Please rethink the issue and give young kids an option not to be in school. But I thank you so much. We love the community. We love the school district. Take care and all be safe.
Thank you.
All right, so hello everyone. My name is Caleb Sink, and I'm proud to be entering my 3rd year as a varsity soccer player. Myself and the team are in full support of a full turf field being put into the high school this year. Many of us play our sport on turf year-round at other facilities other than our school. And did this stop working? Oh, okay. The aspects of the turf field allow for us to play year-round due to its versatility with different weather conditions. The majority of the surrounding schools in this district already have turf fields, and the importance of such an asset has never been as prominent as it was this year in the Fall 2 season, as we were only able to play in there 3 of our total 10 home games on our own home field, which is kind of a big deal. Thousands of dollars ended up having to be spent by the school and the Booster Club renting field space for us just to practice on. And not just this year, but each year many games still need to be rescheduled due to field conditions. And the mud that builds up forced our team to have multiple practices and even many games, including a sectional quarterfinal on the modified fields rather than our varsity field. Not to mention that playing in these muddy, unstable surfaces greatly increases the risk of injury to our players, as well as adds to high rates of fatigue, which is the last thing we want for any of our athletes. And implementing a turf field would greatly help not simply eliminate the issues above, but also help with a lot of them, even though it's not for my own senior class. But thank you for your time.
Good evening. My name is Shelley Goldman, and I am the parent of a student who's going into 10th grade, believe it or not. When we first moved here, we had heard from numerous people, quote, "Bethlehem doesn't care about athletics." I found that hard to believe. However, last year, we were forced to drive to Albany every night from 6:30 to 9 o'clock to share a field because our fields were unusable. Football and lacrosse practices and games were canceled because of our fields. We lose good students to CBA, LaSalle, Albany Academy, schools that pour money and resources into their athletics. I work at Russell Sage College, and scholar athletes are known for having really good grades. They learn time management, they learn structure, they know they have to have high grades to get into the colleges of their choice. The current fields aren't as safe to play on as a turf field would be, even with added drainage. My son, he's built to play sports. He'll be playing in college, and he needs the advantages that a turf field provides in order to have a shot at a better college. Yes, the cost is going up, but we have a budget-neutral situation right now to take advantage of. Please include turf fields in this bond request. We need to show the capital region that Bethlehem does care about its athletics. Thank you.
Good evening. Am I at the right height for you to hear me? Yeah. I always have to lower the mic. My name is Patty Beeler. I'm speaking tonight on behalf of myself, as well as I'm the president of a community group called Bethlehem Tomorrow. And although we respect very much all of the comments from the students and parents tonight, we'll be presenting a different position of our concerns and why. We thank you all very much for the work you do on behalf of the children and the academic community in this town, which is stellar and remarkable. We, Bethlehem Tomorrow, were very active in your recent EB bus vote and in disseminating the information to the public and trying to answer questions for you. We had experts in our group doing a lot of the research. We commend you on that, and the high level of support from the community I'm sure you saw for the electric bus should be something that guides you in what your community is supporting. The community values the health of the children and academics and sports and our student athletes, but it is our job to protect them. What they have now, they have long lives ahead of them. We would like to see their safety continue. Bethlehem Tomorrow opposes the inclusion of the high school synthetic turf field in the proposed facility improvement capital project. It's not about the debt, it's about safety. We have significant concerns about the serious health and environmental effects of this proposal, the lack of meaningful and accurate answers to questions raised by the board in the previous meetings, and your rushed timeline for consideration of this proposal, looking at how new this field really is, but hearing the concerns of the athletes this evening. But accordingly, we request that the board remove the turf proposal from the rest of the capital project so that other elements are not delayed and can be voted on and be seen by the community for all their important merits. Any vote on the turf proposal should occur after the environmental and health concerns have been properly and fully addressed. My co-lead, Peter Iwanowitz, sent a letter to you today, and he talked with you about the concerns in his experience and that our guiding departments don't always protect us until after the facts of serious health impacts have been found. Based on the limited information provided in the proposal summaries and the presentations to the board, we understand that the board is considering spending over $500,000 to install a 100,000 square foot of plastic turf with plastic padding and rubber fill, or what is known in the industry as crumb, made from ground tires. We understand that the rainwater passing over and under these materials will be collected and will be going untreated into the ravine behind the school. Again, it's not about the debt, it's about the health concerns. The synthetic turf proposal will add to the plastic pollution crisis we are currently experiencing locally, nationally, and worldwide. The Norwegian Environmental Agency estimates that 10% of the rubber granules are removed from turf fields each year due to snow clearance, other cleaning, and contact with shoes, clothes, and resulting discharge of significant microplastics. Microplastics will be created and added to the environment by various forms of degradation of the plastic. We also are concerned about the risk of toxins being leached from the site. Chemicals of concern found in the fill material, which is substantiated and provable, and I will send you this in writing after tonight with some links for you to be able to research some of our comments. Chemicals of concern in the fill material include lead, zinc, and other materials, phthalates, volatile organic compounds, polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, and vulcanization compounds. Wow, does that sound safe? Another major problem with synthetic turf is the end of the life disposal. Clean Health Playing Fields has documented numerous problems with such fields, ended up being improperly disposed of by vendors, and misleading claims made by vendors and manufacturers. These environmental issues are not addressed in staff presentations previously that we reviewed online, although your information is helpful and we thank you that it's there. The presence of these toxins in the fill material also suggests the risk of harm to human health. Some of the chemicals found in the tire crumb are endocrine disruptors. Some are known as suspected carcinogens. Didn't they just remove suntan lotions that we've all been using all summer because they're now stating that even though they've been there and approved, they're carcinogens? Alternatives that we seek, the staff has identified problems. Some of the board members have identified some potential sites for some creative solutions. Before we spend this much money, don't you think you might want to look at some of the suggestions, for example, that Mr. Fishbein had tonight? We therefore ask that the board remove from the scope the facilities project budget. I know I'm probably not going to get a lot of applause tonight, but I understand. But please know we care. We think that it would be best for you to consider the appearance of some of these issues, research it. You can make this decision at a future date. I would like to share that Bethlehem Tomorrow is a community organization interested in preserving open space, farmlands, and forests, and the sustainability concerns of our community and beyond. We are not a political action committee. I understand a letter was sent out by a coach and a president, I think, of the union. We even might want to question the ethics of that, but that's not our job to look into any conflicts of interest. We are also an organization involved in the best interests of the community, and we are not involved in any partisan politics whatsoever. Thank you very much for all you do and for your time.
Thank you. We'd just like to remind any of our remaining speakers, please, to keep your comments brief, 3 minutes or less. And again, we do not single out individuals during public comment at our board meetings. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Pablo Lopez. I am the parent of 2 students of the districts. I am also a family doctor by training and a few months shy away of completing a master's in public health. Former student athlete and also the new president of the Bethlehem Central Athletic Association, and we're here to support the construction of this turf field. A couple of reasons, both of them equally important. One is that we really want to support, which we believe are the primary stakeholders, who are student athletes and our coaches. I think that they deserve a safe environment to play, one that can provide them with a flat surface to avoid lower extremity injuries, if you want to put it that way. Also, this turf field will provide the community with a space to exercise on a regular basis. But going back to students, this is not only for athletes, this is also for the entire community of students, and they can be more active, and in that way reducing, childhood obesity, early onset diabetes, and hypertension, to mention some of, those comorbidities that can be harmful to them. Secondly, after review of the evidence and the data out there, the science has not found any significant correlation between harmful effects related to the composition of the chemical composition of the turf field. It's undeniable that there are chemicals there, but the exposure is so less and so little that there has not been any correlation seen between both. That data is available publicly. If you go to CDC, the EPA, they have that data on their FRAP study, so I invite everyone to take a look at it. But bottom line is that we believe that this will be beneficial for everyone from the health aspect angle, and also for the athletes and also for the community. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good evening, I'm Cameron MacDonald. You heard from my daughter Violet earlier. She is one of my 3 daughters who have played field hockey at Bethlehem High School since we moved here 4 years ago. You've already heard how field hockey is a different sport, that it's been changing over time, that it's moved from grass to artificial turf all over the world and in the capital region. And you've also heard that it's a much better sport when it's played on artificial turf. One thing I would like to raise with you, though, that you haven't heard about is the safety feature of playing on artificial turf. Today, the girls play out on a grass field that can get, in addition to having thick grass, can get lumpy and dangerous as the ball takes awkward bounces and dangerous bounces into people's legs, knees, faces, you name it. The issue is that as more and more programs move to artificial turf fields and get used to playing on those surfaces, grass is different for them. So when visiting teams come, I have observed that the visiting team is a danger to the Bethlehem students because they're not accustomed to hitting the ball hard on grass and playing with those awkward bounces, and the ball gets up into dangerous heights. So there's an angle on safety that has not been discussed. Also, you've also heard tonight that Bethlehem is lagging all of the other suburban council schools who play field hockey, who are either have artificial surfaces or are heading that way. And you've also heard about the disadvantage that the teams have here with having to go use fields elsewhere and rent fields elsewhere. It's been mentioned that the boosters spend this money on these fields. What's not mentioned is that is kind of a de facto tax on family, friends, and neighbors who find themselves spending fortunes on overpriced cookie dough or getting their car washed when they really didn't need it. So, I mean, it's a real thing. But something that hasn't been discussed here, or was touched on earlier by another parent about people going to the private schools around and so on, is in the post-pandemic world, facilities are going to matter. Geography is not going to be as much of an issue for people who may be only needing to work from home or do hybrid work where they're only commuting a couple days a week. Longer commutes may be more attractive. A Guilderland may be more attractive to someone. A Niskayuna may be more attractive to someone, and they are getting those better facilities. Where it just might be if they're a family relocating or looking for a different school experience for their kids, they might be willing to make that choice, and the facilities will matter. We weren't here when this district passed a bond resolution for almost $6 million proposed renovation to the auditorium. If you want to talk about want versus need, that sounds like a want, but I think that's a fantastic facility and a great attraction for this school. I don't think it's a bad idea. I think it does lend to need in this environment. Let's not forget, enrollment has been going down every year, but the budget's been going up, except for this year, where it just didn't go down as much as enrollment's going down. There's a competitive environment out there, and this district should be engaged in it. Finally, I know there's been issues raised about safety with respect to this Bethlehem Tomorrow group. First, my kids have been playing on these fields for more than 10 years. Like any other parent, we're interested in the safety of our kids. We pay attention to these things. Yes, something unexpected might happen 10 years from now, where some new discovery is made about suntan oil, but the reality is we have to go with the facts we have today. They're overwhelmingly about safety. Microplastics. There was an excellent presentation just made about how they can be mitigated and controlled. I emailed my presentation to you earlier. I commend to you a study I attached from Sweden where they physically measured and found that they could limit microplastics leaving the field to 100 grams a year. That's 3.5 ounces in weight. Please take a look at that, and thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Paul Tick, and I thank you for the earlier recognition for the help I was able to give in bringing electric school buses to the district. And I'm thrilled that there's so much effort going to be possibly made to bringing more electric school buses to the district to help the whole community be protected from pollution and other problems, and help bring at least a slowing down of global warming. But I'm not so thrilled, as you can guess, with the artificial turf proposal that is being looked at. And science has been mentioned, looking at the facts has been mentioned. So I want to point out that if we're going to look at science, we're going to look at facts, we have to look at all the data. We shouldn't be cherry-picking the data that we like and ignoring the rest. So the Environmental Protection Agency, that's the federal government, NCON, the state government, numerous other organizations, state, federal, and private nonprofits and universities do in fact warn of major dangers from artificial turf. The school board, unfortunately, has been using industry consultants as if they were objective experts. They're friendly, polite, they're polished, but they do have significant conflicts of interest. That is, they profit from the sale of artificial turf. They're salespeople. That's great for them. My father was a salesperson too. They have a job to do, but they're not experts in health, in safety, in science, or in the environment. The school board should not be using them as if they were neutral and objective in their opinions. And I believe one of the consultants did say that he has not even yet been asked to look at alternatives to artificial turf for the school. So that is really important for the school board to start addressing. In addition, the school board, as far as I can see, has not yet consulted with experts on water pollution, air pollution, land pollution, health and safety experts who have long studied the dangers of artificial turf. We've listened to many whose opinion about sports are useful, valuable, cared about, but we must remember they're not experts in the fields of public health, science, land use, the environment, etc. Much of the information that's been presented cites only the studies or parts of studies that they want us to hear. I want to point out that even the Department of Environmental Conservation offers many warnings about the dangers of artificial turf fields, despite what some advocates of the fields have said here. Keep in mind also that waste tires are filled with numerous different types of chemicals. Every single brand of tire is different, and each different type of tire is different and filled with different chemicals. Tens of thousands of these tires go into each turf field. And because of all these differences, it's impossible to know which chemicals from which tires are in any particular field. And this is just one reason why so many of the objective studies say that the safety of artificial turf cannot be assured. Some claim that creating and using artificial turf is a great way to recycle used tires. They say that when the artificial turf is no longer useful in about 10 years, it's simply recycled. But at least one major investigation has proven that artificial turf does not get recycled. There is no recycling facility for that in the United States. And the turf ends up in landfills, and sometimes has even been found in wetlands around the country, illegally dumped. So I thank the school board for all your thoughtfulness on so many issues, but like we tell the kids often, you still got some homework to do. I look forward to looking at your additional homework and additional proposals on this issue. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi there, my name is Phil Ridgway. I'm going to, first, I want to thank the board for your service to the school district. What you do is just great and benefits all of our students. I'm going to address you in 3 different roles tonight. The first is as a district resident and parent of 4 children that have gone through this system, our school system. My youngest will be a junior in the fall. And as a resident, I would urge you to include the turf field in the scope of this project, and to give community members a chance to vote on that project. The second is as a physical education teacher. I'm entering my 20th year teaching in the district. Last year was a very challenging year for us with equipment, with facilities. To have a turf field available to us to go through a year like we had last year would be amazing. It would be a game changer. It's a safe surface, level, predictable. You know, some people, they call me a gym teacher. I don't teach gym. I teach physical education. I teach wellness. I teach fitness concepts, and I teach health concepts. And I would incorporate all of those using those facilities. And the last role is as a soccer coach. I've been coaching on those fields for 19 years, 19 seasons. And as was mentioned before, this is a clay-based field where everything has to be perfect for the playing surface to be appropriate. If you get too much rain, it takes days for it to drain and to be appropriate. If you get too much sun, it becomes hard and crusty. There are many lower extremity injuries, ankles, knees, that, you know, that surface really is not safe. I even walked the field a couple of days ago, and from all the rain we had in July, it rained, I think, nearly every day of the month. It's still soft. If you go out to the corners of where that field is, it's still soft, and it hasn't rained in 2 weeks. So This is something that I think is necessary and appropriate, and thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Agnes Zellin. I'm a resident of Bethlehem. I am speaking tonight with the unpopular position to oppose the purchase, the budget inclusion for the purchase of artificial turf at our high school. You have been a board that has demonstrated some very wise decisions to move our district toward a more sustainable use of resources. It is therefore, quite frankly, why I am quite surprised that this decision is being made as quickly as it is, and without, as it's been stated before, the circumspect research that you should be doing due diligence in order to see all sides of the issue from a safety perspective, both for our students and as well for our environment. I want to clarify that I'm not a member of a political action committee. I'm speaking to you here tonight as a state and national board certified teacher, a resident of Bethlehem, a parent of a graduate of Bethlehem Central, and a contributing community member who cares deeply about our youngest students and residents. As a teacher, I believe that the primary role and responsibility is to keep students safe and give them the academic, social, and emotional tools to become critical thinkers. And I'm asking you all to join in that process of critical thinking and put a brake on this decision to lay artificial turf and employ some critical thinking. Contrary to what others may want to use as evidence to the so-called safety of artificial turf, there is, as has been said by previous folks here, that there are still a lot of unanswered questions, a lot of studies by the same institutions that have been cited, the National Institute of Health, the CDC, the DEC, as well as the fact that we have heard from the industry, and we have not heard, as it has also been stated by scientists and scholarship within the environmental community. We have heard PFAS is safe. We have heard tobacco is safe. We have heard plastics are safe. We have heard styrofoam is safe. And over the last 10 years, many of us have fought really hard at the county and state and federal level to get many of these products banned. The industry comes back fighting hard, and we have to fight back because there's a lot at stake here, as we see in the most recent national statements of the acceleration of global warming. I want to ask you if you've asked these questions. Do you know how much heat artificial turf retains? Have you researched what is included in the washing of artificial turf, including herbicides and fungicides? Have you thoroughly investigated the menu of toxins artificial turf, which is made primarily from old tires, contains? They have been stated before. Let me say that one of them is flame retardant, the famous PFAS that we are now fighting Norlight to stop burning. The chemicals have been proved to cause cancer and other diseases, and as the turf degrades over time, larger quantities of chemicals are in fact released. Have you researched what will happen when the worn-out synthetic turf is needed to be replaced? While the EPA strictly regulates the disposal of rubber tires, there's no regulation at the moment of the disposal of artificial turf containing crumbled tires. Have you further researched the impact on the young players whose health and well-being we are responsible for? It seems as though there's a comfort level that our players are going to be safe. I am highly suspect of that. Have you considered this? As the turf becomes warmer, the amount of its off-gassing increases. This is code for toxic fumes. There are measurable short-term effects, ill effects from this, and long-term side effects that have not yet been studied. But this should certainly be concerning to us as our students are just in the early stages of their life journey. Our role as parents and educators should be to provide our students with the safest environment with which to learn and play. So if other districts have been making this decision, I say, so what? Are we to risk our children's health and the health of the environment for the sake of winning a game? Given the resounding alarms that are going off related to our accelerated climate change due to toxic chemicals we're releasing into the environment, perhaps the biggest lesson we can afford to our children is the example to lead with courage and responsibility to look at this issue much more deeply. There is not a lot more time. before we are going to see the ill effects of many of our decisions today. If you must put this into a vote, please separate the bond items that are so vitally needed to benefit a much larger group of our student population, and put this to a separate vote so taxpayers know exactly what they are voting for. And so those of us who are concerned about the environmental impact of our decisions today also have a chance to make an informed vote. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
My name is David Rounds. I am the boys varsity lacrosse coach. I'm a parent of 4 children that went through the athletics program, the music program, the theater program at the school, and I am the president of the Bethlehem Teachers Association. 26 years coaching on this field, I will state one thing that is an absolute fact. We have had numerous bond projects, all with natural solutions to try to fix the fields. We have brought in sand, we have brought in soil, we have brought in drainage, we have brought in all different filters and techniques to try to fix the problem. We have spent millions of dollars to try to make our fields, especially our main varsity field, playable. And the absolute fact is, after all that work, that field still does not drain. We've tried dozens of natural processes. Our grounds crew spends countless hours trying to make our fields playable, when the reality is geology of the clay wins out. Okay, we can debate natural alternatives for another 6 months, but something tells me after 26 years of experience of trying that route, that in 5 years we're going to be having this conversation again. We had this conversation in 2013, we had it before 2013. We've had it after 2013. We're having it now. If there's a natural solution and this board decides to go to that route, I really pray that we're not having this conversation again in 5 years. My experience as a coach tells me we probably will. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Tim Hannigan. I'm a 2004 graduate of Bethlehem High School. I'm the former Senate president. I'm glad I didn't have to campaign against Ms. Soka because I would have lost. But in response to some of the comments that were made this evening, I heard a subset of speakers state that they are representing an alternative position. And I think that that is incorrect. There's only one position that this board is charged with taking, and that is what is in the best interests of our students. And that's the only question that you have to answer. And you heard that tonight from Ms. Soka, from teachers, from Mr. Nolte. If this wasn't in the best interest of the students, it never would have made Mr. Nolte's presentation. Ms. Dellenbaugh wouldn't in previous meetings have said, yeah, I'm in favor of it. Everybody around us has it. Our kids are playing on these surfaces everywhere. The NFL uses it. If it was harmful, we would know. With respect to the scientific studies and the allegations of, and speculative allegations as to harm, or whether to water or to persons, I played lacrosse at the Division I level. We played on exclusively artificial turf surfaces, whether in the Northeast or the South. It's all artificial turf. The reports that I provided to this board back on June 18th and July 14th, the June email I sent was regarding the Department of Health's recommendation. And I note that this board has had a difficult time over the last year following and waiting for the Department of Health to provide any guidance whatsoever on anything that you were supposed to do, even as recently as a few weeks, waiting until the commissioner said, I'm not telling you what we're going to do this year. So we have guidance from the Department of Health, and it says there is no evidence of harmful health effects causally related to the use of turf fields with crumb rubber infill. Game, set, match. That's it. That's what our Department of Health has said. With respect to groundwater contamination, in 2009, the DEC studied that. Our own New York State DEC studied that. We can rely on that study. You as board members can rely on it because the government has even more resources than you do as a small entity of government to study that, analyze it, all right? What Coach Rounds mentioned was that our clay fields, as presently situated, aren't good. They are good, however, for building turf on top of them, because as Mr. Jones noted, the clay actually serves as a greater filter media than does ordinary sand, which we don't have. I got that in Mrs. Rice's earth science class in 9th grade here. The clay is phenomenal for filtering, not so good for playing on. With respect to the safety of our athletes, I would note that the fields are the exact same ones I played on in 2001, 2, 3, and 4. The same problems that exist today existed then. I don't think it's fair for this board anymore to ask student athletes to cancel their senior nights to go play at Albany High School, to pay to play someplace else. We are beyond that as a district. We're beyond that as a society. We expect the best in Bethlehem. We are the best, and we need to reflect that, provide our students with that level. Finally, I object to any suggestion that this proposition should be split off from the rest of the vote. You have a smart electorate in town here, all right? People can read, people know, and this board has talked about this issue for many, many months. The suggestion that you are at all operating with haste or not studying this, I believe is unfounded, because I've watched all of your meetings. They weren't always open to the public like they are now. But you have certainly discussed this issue. Your consultants have advised you on it. You have all of the information you need, and it should be contained within the same proposition, the same package that Mr. Nolte presented, because it's one package. It's one thing. The voters will read that. They will know. The people here are smart enough to understand what that means, and the people here, by the evidence tonight, by what President Soka told you, are ready for you to install a turf field for the residents and the athletes of Bethlehem. Thank you.
Thank you. I would also just like to recognize, we did receive a number of comments from the community, both for and against this particular issue, and I just would like to acknowledge the community's involvement and engagement, which is always appreciated by the board. Seeing no further speakers, we are going to move on to item 6 on the agenda, but I have had a request for a quick recess. So if we can take 5 minutes and then come back, that would be great. Thank you.
Run. What? Not like you were giving it away to me.
My mic back on? Back on? I think everybody's back, so if we could resume the meeting. I know it's getting late, and we want to keep going. Next on the agenda, item 6, action items. A, finance action items. It is recommended by the superintendent that the Board of Education approve the following finance action items 1 through 8.
Point of order.
Yes.
I'd like to isolate item 8, vote on 1 through 7 separately, isolate 8 so we can discuss it.
Okay. I will restate the recommendation. It is recommended by the superintendent that the Board of Education approve the following finance action items 1 through 7.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion?
Yes, Holly, I don't need to isolate it, but the item number 6, approving the agreement for the school resource officers. I read the agreement. I understand that we can cancel it on very little notice. I just want to reiterate that I've asked a number of times to have a specific agenda item to talk about the use of school resource officers and the DARE program, and to better understand what they're doing, and to let the community voice their concerns that they've voiced at town meetings repeatedly. And I've also received a number of emails and comments from community members. So I just want to reiterate the request that we talk more about that at a later meeting, but I don't need
Sure.
to separate it from today's agenda.
My understanding is that we have a presentation in November, I think, to the board.
November 3rd.
November 3rd to the board on that issue. So I think that will cover what you're looking for.
Perfect.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Those items carry. Next, it is recommended by the superintendent that the Board of Education approve finance action item 8.
So moved.
Second.
I'm not going to ask discussion as a question, because I know we would now like to have some discussion. I would suggest that we discuss first the question of, with respect to the scope of the middle school outdoor teaching area, and to get a sense of whether or not people would like to include that. I know at our last meeting, it seemed like people were inclined to leave it for a later project, if at all. And it sounds like in further conversations with the middle school administration that they supported that approach. So I don't know if anyone has thoughts on that at this point.
The last I remember, we had questions about the design and about what problem it was solving. Did we get answers to that?
So there was some follow-up discussion, and I think we had talked about, can we do it in a different location? But really, there's not a great other location without taking up another space. And so I think through some follow-up discussions Greg had with the middle school, they felt like they understood what the concerns were and said, maybe we should take more time, rethink this, and if we want to come back with something at a future bond, we can do that. So there wasn't really another, I guess, proposed design, because they didn't really have another space to do that with what the size of the groups they were looking to have there. So
I would feel comfortable just postponing it to a different bond, because I think that there was more discussion, and I'm not sure what everybody's opinion is on the design, but I think it would deter from the front of the building. And so I'm in favor of postponing it to another bond or different design.
I would agree.
I would also agree with that. Even if we dug down and made it more of a pit-type situation rather than level, which is what they're looking at, taking that embankment and digging into the embankment to create it, that possibly we're not sure would block the view of the LMC. But if it was a pit under a different circumstance, it might work. But it really needs to be, the design really needs to be rethought if they're going to use that space. So I would agree to postpone it.
Okay.
I just had a question. Would we have to postpone it if we, I guess what I'm asking is, can we allocate the money and just not have a final design? I mean, we could, I guess what I'm saying is, would we have to take it out completely and just push it aside for another time, I guess, is what I wanted to know.
Doesn't it have to be approved?
Yeah, we would
So
be
the specs, I think, would have to be approved.
We'd be
Is that
removing
correct,
it
Greg?
from the scope.
From the scope?
So that's what we're saying it's okay to remove that because they want to rethink it anyway, so it's fine.
I'm fine removing it. Okay, so it sounds like, Will, did you have a different opinion?
No, I would have supported it. I think that we learned over the last year and a half the importance of having some flexible teaching spaces and maximizing what we're able to use safely. So it's a proposal that I didn't personally have a problem with, but if they've withdrawn their request for it, I'm not going to fight them for that.
Okay. Next is the question of whether or not we include the funding for infrastructure for additional electric vehicle charging.
Well, now that we have the buses, we sort of have to.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think we should. I think especially given the essential budget neutrality of this particular bond, this is the time to go ahead and add it in. I don't know if anyone disagrees.
I think we've committed to electric buses, so we should honor that commitment and move forward with it.
Okay. Wendy, you concur?
Absolutely.
Okay. All right, so next up, the question of the turf. So we need to decide whether or not to include that in the scope of the project. I know I have stated at our prior meeting that I am in favor of including it. And I will just reiterate that my position on that hasn't changed. I feel like I've paid close attention to the presentations that we've had since March on the topic and read the materials that we've been provided by Greg and our architects and by community members, both for and against the project. And the presentations, the materials that have been put together over the years by the Department of Health and DEC and EPA on this particular issue. And I know there was some conversations about, whether it is a want or a need. I do think for our athletes, it is a need in the same way that, fixing our auditorium was a need for our musicians and our performers. So that's where I am on this.
First, I've been in the district for 20 years. I've had 3 students go through and graduate. And I've been involved since the day my kids entered the front door of the kindergarten school. What did they call it? I don't even remember. ELC. The ELC. I was going to say the LMC. I was getting confused. But since first grade at Guillemot and then Eagle, and I ran for the school board in 2013. And I was highly involved coming to board meetings. I was here when all the sports parents showed up. And I was one of those people who actually voted against the turf back then, so please don't shoot me. But my reasoning was because we had significant budget cuts. We were coming off a really terrible time with a state aid. We had significant slashes to education, and I couldn't see spending that type of money. But the concerns were mainly safety from the people who came out and voted against it at the time, and budget cuts. But that was 8 years ago, and there's been a lot of studies and a lot of research, and I have done my due diligence by reading the articles, both for and against, and there has been nothing that is substantiated that says it is unhealthy for students to be on turf. It's advantage to our district. We're the top district in our area. We are putting our students at a deficit by having to go to other schools. it's going to be a playing field that benefits all the students, not just the students who are involved in field hockey or lacrosse or soccer. It's our PE students. And I'm here to advocate for our students, and it really is the right time and the right thing to do for the students of Bethlehem. Just like Holly said about the auditorium, students were working in an auditorium that was old, it didn't have the right facilities, and we're an above-average district who should have some of the amenities that the other school districts have in the suburban council. We shouldn't be sending our students by bus that's taking 3 hours away from their night when they should be studying. Last year, I was diagnosed with stage 1 breast cancer. My daughter's had a rare form of childhood pancreatic cancer, and I have a type 1 diabetic son. There are carcinogens in our food. There are elements in our air. We cannot patrol every little thing that goes into our body. I mean, we can try, but, half the time we don't even know. And I feel comfortable having all of those chronic illnesses and issues in my house that I would feel comfortable putting a turf field down for the students of Bethlehem. And with all of that, I strongly support a turf field, and I think it would be really sad if we didn't get that passed this time around.
And I did forget one, probably the most important thing that I meant to say, which is that the idea is that we're putting this out for the community to vote on it. And obviously, there are a lot of strong opinions in our community on both sides. We have seen that both tonight and in the emails that we've received and outreach from community members. And I do feel strongly that, we should be letting the community ultimately make the decision.
And I agree, it's not my choice, it's my opinion to put it on the referendum, to put it out for a bond vote. But I also am highly against splitting it out, because I think this time around, we're not talking about money, we're not talking about budget cuts, we're talking about a net zero balance, and that's a disservice to the students if we're splitting it out. And there's no reason to this time around. Last time there was a reason, this time there is none, and that's my position at this time.
Jonathan, I'll just kind of go around the
Sure.
circle.
I've been a resident for 30 years. I'm a former competitive ice dancer. I know about competition. I know about what it gives to students. The question was asked that we should decide what's in the best interest of students. Well, we can't control everything that goes in our bodies or everything in our environment. The things we can control, we should. People have said that the EPA says that it's not a problem, but this is the same EPA that said that the air at the World Trade Center after 9/11 was not a problem, and now we have people dying of it. This is the same EPA that said that Teflon was not a problem, and now you can't find a Teflon pan because all of us, especially baby boomers and the generation after that, I forget what they're called, have Teflon floating around in our body, in our blood, along with microplastics, I might add. I do care about athletics. I do care about the students, but I care about their health because most of our students will play sports for a few years. It's the rare exception of someone who ends up playing in high school and ends up either making a career or even making it to the Olympics. DOH has said that there are no ill health effects, as has the EPA, but the problem with that is that they're saying that it's not unhealthy. There's not a single study that says it's safe. And there's a real marked difference in that. If I have my children out there on the track, which my son ran track for Bethlehem, I don't want them out there if it's going to harm their life later on. As far as the crumb rubber issue, and the the presentation we had by the consultants, who, as far as I can figure, really are the salespeople. I haven't been able to discern that they are not biased in this. I have one of my former students whose son now plays high-level soccer, and he plays on turf fields. When he gets injured, the crumb rubber ends up sometimes in the wound. It certainly comes out in either pockets, pants cuffs, socks, and regardless of how much remediation goes into it, his mother takes out about a quarter cup of crumb rubber out of their washing machine and dryer every time she does his clothes. So this is not benign. It's not something that's going to be kept in the field. It's something that's always going to get out. And as far as microplastics, every time you slide across, play on, move, your sneakers are going to break off micro pieces, they're going to pick it up, and they're going to spread it. You may be able to get some of it off on some of the remediation, but you're not going to get it all off. And it's just going to contribute to the plastic problem we already have, which is a health hazard to us and to our kids and to the entire community. And finally, with regard to bifurcation, I'm strongly in favor of bifurcation because I'm concerned about, while this right now is a budget neutral bond issue, if it goes out to the community and the community looks at it and says, you know, I like everything that's there, but I can't live with the contaminants and the pollution of, and the potential damage of a turf field, and it's voted down, we are looking at an even longer time to get the other projects done and much more expense. Judy, I think you told me it was about 5% more is what your best guess was. That's going to create something that's not budget neutral and not as attractive. So for all of those reasons, and thinking first and foremost about the safety and what's best for our students, I cannot vote in favor of keeping the turf in, and I would strongly recommend that we bifurcate the vote.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm not an expert, right? So we had 7 meetings. We've asked a lot of questions. We've had a ton of emails and reports. And, Jonathan, you saying that we don't have a report that says it's safe, I just don't think that that's a thing that exists, right? Like, you're a lawyer. We don't issue reports that assure people that things are safe. We assure that they're not hazardous. That's about as far as that goes. The health argument I struggle with because we're still sending our athletes to play on turf anyway. We're sending them late at night to drive by themselves. Just all the health aspects are completely undone in my mind, and we're paying for the pleasure of sending our students to play on turf anyway and to have the same health effects from other people's turf. So I sort of disregard that health piece. Bifurcation, I don't think we have to decide tonight anyway, and I suggest that we don't. I think it's something I need to think about a little bit more. If we're afraid that many community members would oppose it, that it would drag down all of the other proposals, then in my mind, that tells us something about the proposal itself that maybe we need to think about. So I need to sit on the bifurcation, but I do support the inclusion of turf to be put out for a community vote.
I know we're not talking about the bifurcation, but I wanted to ask a clarifying question to Judy. So if, let's say, we didn't bifurcate out the issues and we had to put it to another vote, like let's say it went down, and you're talking about the 5% increase, you're talking costs, correct?
Cost increases, yes, because of a delay in
But we
1
should
year.
still have the same type of aid where it would possibly still be a neutral
because with this proposal as we laid out tonight, there's still the untapped monies in the reserve fund, and we typically add to that every year, I think it's safe to say it would still be budget neutral.
Right, it'd just be a little bit longer. So that still would give the opportunity for people, if it wasn't split out, to vote. If it were to go down, which I do think the demographics are much different than 8 years ago, we would still have that opportunity if that were to be the case.
But Willow is correct. We don't need to make that decision tonight. Tonight, we just need to decide with respect to scope, whether we are including it or not. Meredith?
I just wanted to thank the various administrators who are doing the work on this, and also the board for all the work that we all have done over the last 6 or 7 months regarding this. Thank you for all the information that you have provided us. Thank you to the community members who've spoken and also sent us emails, sent us studies, assured that we have read those studies. We have read the studies that are provided to us by our architects. I'm sure we've all done our own independent research as well, because I know that we know that this is an important decision. And I wanted to thank the board for all of your questions over the last 6 months, because I think that you all have given us some really good things to think about. You opened up new ideas for me to think about and question myself. And so I've put a lot of thought into this. I am in support of putting the turf field into the bond vote for the community to decide. At the last meeting, speaking of questions that were brought up, at the last meeting, we started talking about runoff into the groundwater, and I expressed a lot of concerns about that, and questioning, containment of the Crum River and questioning filtration. I asked for that information, and we saw it tonight, and I wanted to, thank everyone for giving that information, because I think it was very important to help me understand what this process was going to look like and address those concerns. I do now feel comfortable that we are going to have the mitigation to contain the Crum River. As I really appreciate everyone who came out and spoke tonight, or at least, sat here in this hot weather, because we have really listened to the students. Our students are already playing on turf, as Willow said. And we're asking parents and community members to pay for that privilege, and I don't think that's fair. Our fields are unplayable. I don't have experience with this. I'm relying on the people, the students and the coaches who have experience in this field, and they are unplayable for most, not most, but much of the time. And I think we've sunk a lot of money into trying to improve those fields over the last 10 plus years, and it hasn't worked. So I think it is time to put this to a vote in front of our community, and I support that.
Thanks, Meredith. Wendy?
Yes, I would also like to speak in favor of keeping the turf project in the budget proposal and in with everything else, because I've lived in the district 30 years. And for 30 years, the fields have been a mess. And I think that we would have fixed them if we could have in the past 30 years. Nothing has worked. So one turf field is, I think, worth our consideration. And I think it should go to a vote. And I think it will probably ultimately pass. But that's just my thoughts. So, yes.
Thank you. So it sounds like we have a majority for including the turf field within the scope of the project. Judy, can I just double check with you with those 3 items? Have we covered all of the questions that we need to answer before we?
Largely, yes. The only other question is, were there any other changes or deletions to the scope? Or are you okay with the slides that Greg had gone through, his subtotal part 1? So all of the other additions and revisions to the scope, we're recommending that they be included. And if you all are good with that as well, the potential project amount would align with what was on the presentation tonight, and that would match to the detail list that would be included with the seeker resolution.
Okay. I don't have any other additions or deletions, and if anyone else has.
No.
No. Judy, do we have to rewrite the resolution to take out the outdoor teaching area?
No.
Okay.
Because the resolution doesn't have an amount in it.
Okay.
The project approval resolution at a subsequent meeting will have the amounts.
Okay.
But this is just going to be the attachment that accompanies the seeker paperwork.
Okay.
There being no further discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
No.
Any abstentions? Motion passes. B, professional personnel action items. It is recommended by the superintendent that the Board of Education approve the following professional personnel action items 1 through 19.
So moved.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? That passes. C, support personnel action items. It is recommended by the superintendent that the Board of Education approve the following support staff action items 1 through 21.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? That passes. D, other action items. It is recommended by the superintendent that the Board of Education approve the following action items 1 through 3.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? That passes. E, 2021-2022 annual district action item. It is recommended by the superintendent that the Board of Education approve the following annual contractual action item 1.
So moved. Second.
Any discussion?
I renew my objection to this list. I know we have to approve it. That's my understanding. But this list contains individuals that work both sides of the aisle. They represent school districts and they represent individuals. That's a real hard thing to do, and to do it fairly. And I've seen some of these individuals do this, and I believe that it has been unfair to our district in particular, from what I've seen and from what parents have told me. So I have a real concern about the fact that we're required to approve this list. So I'm going to have to vote no.
Thanks, Jonathan. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Nay.
Any abstentions? That carries. 7, recognition of public comment on a non-agenda item. At this time, if we have anybody left who would like to address the board on a non-agenda item, now is the time to come forward. Item 8, future meetings and events. Our next regular board meeting is on Wednesday, September 1st, anticipating an executive session at 6 and the open meeting starting at 7. The first day of school is Thursday, September 9th. The board meeting after that is on Wednesday, September 22nd. Again, anticipating an executive session at 6 and the meeting the open meeting at 7. And on Monday, September 27th at 5:30 p.m., there is an audit committee meeting. Seeing no need to go back into executive session, could I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Meeting adjourned.